And we are live. Welcome to another edition of the Friday FARcast. And look who's here. Look who's here. The star of the show is back. Hello, Beth Berry. Yeah, it's hot down here too. Yes, it is the return of the Mac. Mercury retrograde has brought us Jasper, the man, the myth, the meow. Now, the meow you're hearing is Peachy because now she wants in on the action. So today, today I decided to destroy Jasper's homeless encampment in, in the laundry room. I'm sorry, that's what it was. I destroyed his homeless encampment in the laundry room. Oh, look who's here. Miss Thing is here now. Oh, yeah, now you want to be here, don't you? You want in on the action as well. There she is, Pachita. So Jasper was spending all his time in this laundry basket in the laundry room, right? And there was some clothes in there, and sometimes I'm not the best Virgo. And it's like, are they dirty? Are they clean? I'm not sure. But I know that they're certainly full of hair. So I just kind of let them like hang out there for a while. And it was like, not anymore. No, I'm dealing. It's Mercury retrograde. I'm dealing with that fucking laundry. Okay, and you don't get the laundry basket anymore. So his little homeless encampment has been dismantled. So he's back. That's what it took. I had to take away your comfort zone, and then little Miss Thing. We'll see what she does. She still hasn't quite figured out the rhythm yet. She knows she wants in, but she wants in on her own terms. Jasper, on the other hand, he knows the joy of being present and serving. Her, I don't know. I know what her joy is. It's me serving her. That's her joy. Me serving her. Oh, let's see. We got a good group here today. Let's see. Tom Jordan's here. Miss Nikki's here. Susie Gemini's here. Ryan's here. Uh, our good pal Gucci the Goats in the house. Uh, Soros My McMahon. Good crowd. We got 66 people. The magic number. Okay, let me set the stage for today's show. I put out a call, and the call was, does anybody know anybody in Maui that I can get in touch with so we can get some boots on the ground reportage. And there was a client who lives in California who knows somebody who has a healing center on Maui, and through her, she was on vacation while all this was happening in Washington State, and through her, she got me in touch with a fellow by the name of Daniel Aaron. And Daniel is, how would I describe Daniel? He's like a coach, a consultant, a counselor, an entrepreneur, and he's got an astrological background as well. So he dabbles in astrology. And so Daniel and I started to talk about a week ago, in exchanging text messages and trying to kind of get up to speed and see, kind of where he's at with things, where I'm at, because it's sort of like a Rorschach. We'll see the same thing, but we might see something different. And of course, he's clearly closer to the epicenter of the event than I am, and so it's always good to kind of sift through those sorts of details. And what I found is that we're more or less on the same page. I think I tend to be perhaps a little darker and a little more how shall we say, conspiratorial, and he's probably, I would say, more Dakin and kind of heart centered. This is a very heart centered guy, and not in a flaky, fluffy way. Like he's really living from that space, right? That's not to say that he's not aware of certain things, but how he goes about working kind of through this is from a place of service and being available to others, right? So just keep that in mind as we go through this interview, and what I try to um, pull out of him from what the experience is like there. Now, this will not be the last interview that I'll do with Daniel, and it won't be the last interview that I'll be doing with people from Maui, because there's another person whom I've yet to contact who is literally in town and having to deal with what's happened. Daniel lives 15 miles outside of Lahaina. And one of the things that you'll hear in the interview is the drastic discrepancy of what it's like to live 15 miles away from a bomb site. In his world, life hasn't changed. 15 miles away, it's a whole different reality. And in a weird way, that's kind of um, endemic of our times, right? Like I could be walking around and I could be living my life and doing my thing, which, for most of you, you probably have a pretty good sense as to what that is. Meanwhile, I could be crossing paths with somebody else who, over the last 3 years, has taken a very different path and followed very different protocols and said yes to things that I chose not to say yes to. And their life could be extremely different, both from a health perspective, from a logistics perspective, right? And we might both be living within a 10-mile proximity of one another. So this is really a very interesting kind of algorithm for who we are and how our realities, even though separated by a mere 25-minute car drive, can be vastly different. So keep that in mind as I play the interview. It's about an hour long. We're not going to be here for the full 2 hours. By the way, Russ Winter will be on the show next week, and Russ will be on the first Friday of every month versus the last Friday of every month. So just a slight tweak with the programming. And I wanted to make sure that I got Daniel in and kind of, not wait until the situation cools. So that's one of the things we talk about is what happens when the situation cools and where do they go next. Before I do that, I do want to mention that we are having an event here in October, starting on Friday the 13th, during the second of the 3 Great American Eclipses coming right through Kerrville, Texas. And I think there's a few rooms left at the Inn of the Hills in Kerrville. And if you go to Robert, I'm raising the price, by the way. I'm already behind it. Today, the price goes up to $711 for the entire weekend. But we're going to have a great roster of speakers. Shauna Home, who is just absolutely fantastic. If you don't know her work, I'll put a link in the show notes. You'll be blown away by her. She's going to give a presentation on manifesting, and it's not what you think. It's not your typical Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich, because Shauna's path towards manifesting what she wanted in her life is legit, and it wasn't because she, uttered a few magical mantras every day. There's a blueprint, and Shauna's going to bring the blueprint to our event. She's an Aries, right? And when we talk about the eclipse, Aries plays a role. So if the sun is in Libra, then Libra is being eclipsed, and we're being shown some secrets of Aries, right? It's Aries that we're going to be working with a lot at the event. So she'll be here. Last minute addition, Dr. Narco Longo from Old World, Florida, will be joining us at the event. And I know a lot of you are familiar with his channel, which is exploding, skyrocketing, right? Just going off the charts. He'll be here, and He'll be doing a presentation. We've got Leela, who is one of our superstars in chat and is a bona fide expert practitioner of tremor release therapy. She'll be talking about that. My buddy Mark S. is going to be there. He'll be doing spiritual caricatures for everyone in the house. Our friend Darlena, who is the queen of human design, she'll be talking about human design and the eclipses. We're going to have a panel on health. There's so much information and so much nutrients for your mind and body and spirit that we're going to be sharing amongst one another on that weekend. Go to robertphoenix.com. If you haven't signed up and you want to, I would say now's your time to do it because the window is closing for that. And of course, True Hemp Science, which is the sponsor of the show. And if you want to get some of the best hemp CBD products, it's not just CBD. Chris is an alchemist. And what he does is he mixes CGA and CBD and all these other goodies, terpenes. He's coming up with these really exquisite blends, and they're crafted for very specific needs. So if you spend $100 or more and type in 15MINS, 15MINS, you will get free product with your order of $100 or more. $150 or more, you get free shipping. And there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. Chris, as he was last year, will be at the event, and he'll have a little booth there. He'll be making emulsified CBD cocktails for people, and we'll even get them up, and we'll have a little chat about CBD as well while he's there. He's brilliant. So there we go. That's the official business of the show. Chattaria, you're the best. Let's get into this. Let's play the interview between myself and Daniel Aaron. This took place yesterday, and we're starting to peel the layers back on Lahaina. Here we go. Edition of the Friday FARcast. Today is actually Thursday, and we're doing a little bit of a pre-record. And this is with somebody who I've just met and over text and just our brief time together. I really enjoyed connecting with him. And he seems like he's a very down-to-earth, connected, and spiritual guy. His name is Daniel Aaron. He lives in Maui, and he's a consultant and a coach, and has some astrological skills at his disposal as well. And we may get into a little astrology, but really why I have Daniel on the show today is to kind of get a feel as to what's happening in Maui and around Lahaina. And Daniel, I want to thank you for taking time out and joining us today. So welcome to the show.
Robert, thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Happy to help and serve however I can, and really appreciate all that you're doing in the world here.
Well, thank you. And it always feels like it's never enough, right? It just that's the common feeling I have. But I think if enough of us put some effort together, we might be able to fill the void. So, and I know that I'm not the only one, and you're not the only one. And I think in a lot of ways that is like how our story is evolving, right? As kind of a species, and as a planet, as a people, being connected like this through technology, sometimes through disaster. I didn't know you before last week, and here we are now, right? So I think out of tragedy, good things can come and arise out of it. And let's see where we go today. I'm really interested because you and I kind of talked a little bit on text earlier in the week, and you were going to kind of circulate and help out. Why don't you just kind of jump in here and give people kind of a sense as to what the vibe is on the island right now?
Yeah, sure. Well, indeed, I'm circulating a lot from various perspectives. One, just because I want to understand more of what's going on. From another, because I want to be of best service as I can. And one way of saying what's going on the island is it's affected everybody, right? What's gone on has affected everybody. The only question is in what ways. And obviously, some people in really severe ways, from people losing their lives to people being hurt to people losing their buildings, their businesses, their homes. There's still, last I knew, 1,000 people missing. So how challenging that is to have a loved one that you don't know where they are, what's going on with them. So that's like the most severe ways that people have been hurt and harmed by this. And then those of us that have been less directly affected, it's heavy. It's a collective trauma. And so what's going on here is that a lot of people are afraid, have guilt. There's a somber feeling. Even, I don't know, just and it's interesting to see because it affects people in different ways. And some people are like stepping up. What can I do to help? And others are, angry and venting their vitriol. And then there's others that are just like hanging back and feeling paralyzed. So it's affecting people in different ways, but it's certainly a big factor. Plus, tourism has, basically dropped off a cliff here. So even people that were not directly affected suddenly have lost their ability to work, lost their income. So there's a lot happening over here for sure.
Well, it's okay because $700 is on its way, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, everything's going to be all right.
Just hang out for that $700 and go buy some scratchers. Who knows? Right? So one of the things that you and I did talk about is the fact that you're about 25 miles away from Lahaina, right? Isn't that about right? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Right. And for you, it's kind of like your world is untouched in some ways. I mean, of course, you have to deal with everything else, but no fire, no evacuation. That's just got to be weird.
Oh, it's so weird, Robert. I mean, like literally in this moment, I'm in my office studio speaking to you. And, what was it 14 days ago? I hear, oh, yeah, there's some fires going on and these hurricane winds. And, oh, so-and-so's got to evacuate. I go to bed that night. This was a Tuesday night. And you're like, oh, yeah, this could, I don't know. This is a little bit scary. What's going on? I wake up the next morning, and see the videos and hear the stories. And it's, the fires have ravaged over in Lahaina and up in Kula. And, and not long after that, I had an appointment in town and I'm still trying to process all the news. And I walk into town and people are shopping and people are driving. I'm like, whoa, it's like a war zone. And it's probably only 10, 15 miles away. Really. It seems like a long ways because of the drive. But yeah, it's weird to, and that's where I think for some of the people, the survivor's guilt is strange too. Cause like, the fires didn't reach my home. And meanwhile, over here, people have lost everything. And how is that fair? It brings people to question.
So when the fires were happening, let's go back. You said that there were hurricane-like winds the night before. Did you notice that? Was that part of the news cycle?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, while we were aware that there was a hurricane reported that went well south of us. So, and we're not a stranger here to hurricanes. We've been very lucky for the last many years. We haven't had any come really right on us. Though the winds were definitely apparent, all over the island, and trees were blowing over, and my daughter's school got closed because they had a bunch of like telephone poles collapse, which is part of what happened in Lahaina, or at least that's what it looks like. So that the winds were for real, whether that was a contributing factor or, there's still so many questions about what's really gone on.
Right. When it was happening, could you see the sky? Was it dark? Was it gray? Was it clouded? What were the meteorological conditions when this was happening?
Well, I mean, when it was really starting was at night, so I didn't see a whole lot. And it didn't feel like we were in the midst of a tropical storm. We had the winds, but as I recall now, and honestly, it's been a couple of weeks and a lot's gone down since then. I don't remember so specifically, but I don't remember it being like crazy rain or anything like that. But certainly high winds.
But with the fire, did you see like gray ashen sky? Was that obvious that was happening?
No, from where I am, not at all. So the direction of the winds was kind of blowing that stuff away. So when I saw the video, I was like, I mean, it was so severe. I mean, I guess everybody's seen the videos now, the level of like toxic smoke coming up specifically from Lahaina and the black clouds. It was pretty horrifying.
Yeah. Have you been physically into Lahaina since the fire?
Oh yeah, many times now. Because I started volunteering that week, and through that work, I've been going over there probably, I don't know, 6, 8 times now, and not into the sort of downtown area where the worst of the fire was, because that's still cordoned off. Though enough that I've driven through and really seen it. Like I'm lucky, and I've never been in an actual war zone in my life, but it's a lot like what I imagined, just to see rows and rows of houses just leveled, and the gray and the soot and the carcasses of cars. It's stark. It's impressive.
So this is a really interesting point, and there's a reason why I asked you that question.
Yeah.
And I think I brought it up with our common friend Martha. And one of the things that I was very interested in trying to find out was there's a guy by the name of Miles Mathis who does a lot of debunking. And he was looking at a lot of the photos from Lahaina, and he was basically saying that they were fake, and that nothing to that extent happened, and it was really like a psychological operation, and it was being used to raise money and divert funds and all these things. So the reason I asked you that question was so that you could address that question, and if there's any doubt in people's minds that if this was real or not real, based on your observation, you've seen a disaster. Is that correct?
Firsthand, yeah. I mean, with my own eyes, and I've met with a lot of victims that I didn't know, and in my service work over there, and plus I have a lot of friends and business colleagues who lost homes or businesses. So whether there's more to the story and there's anything valid about what he's saying, could be, I don't know, but the damage is severe and very real.
Right. My sense too here, and you could chime in if you want, is that like where are the adults in this situation? Right. Like if you look at, say, for instance, the fellow who was in charge of the emergency sirens, right? And he you and I talked a little bit about this, I think. And when asked if he would do something different or did he regret his decision to not have those sirens continue to sound the alarm, he emphatically said no. And it's like, well, if we had done that, then people would have thought it was a hurricane or a monsoon or something, and then got up higher in their dwelling so that the water wouldn't come down. But he was just so adamant that there was no other course of action, right? And then, of course, he has to step down from his job. And then I think maybe about 2 days later, Josh Green comes out and he gives the answer that I would have given, which was, of course, we wish we would have done something differently. But in hindsight, we didn't. And here's the reason why. So it was like Josh Green let this guy kind of take the fall in some ways through his own hubris. And then he had the politically correct answer with how the whole thing went down with the sirens. But I don't even get a sense that even Josh Green has this, sense of being like an adult. Where are the adults in the room here? Right? Do you have any sense of that? Like who's in charge and what's the plan?
Yeah. Gosh, it's in one way what you're asking is hilarious. In the other way, it's tragically not funny at all.
Right.
Because I know for myself, I mess up with so many things in life. Every day I make so many mistakes. The one thing that I think I can do reasonably well is admit my mistakes. And the quantity of neglect, negligence, error that happened in the local government seems pretty prolific here. And how much that guy that made the ridiculous announcement that you just spoke about, was how much of that response was orchestrated by Josh Green or others, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, an embarrassing for him to say that. It would have been so much better to just say, yeah, gosh, we really screwed up.
Right.
But and I have some sympathy too. Like, I mean, who wants to say, yeah, my failure is at cause for this tragedy, or part of the cause? But still, yeah, it's a great question. Where are the adults? I don't know. Where are the adults is one question, but also what's really behind this level of negligence
Or seeming
or
incompetence, negligence and seeming incompetence, right? They always seem to go hand in hand. And yet your question, I think, is spot on. Who's behind it and what's behind it? And there's lots of wild speculation about, everything from, deep water ports, China, which you and I talked about. You've got the Oprah Winfrey connection and all these elites and their properties. The 15-minute green city, the green state. We know that Josh Green. Oh, there you go. There's your green governor, right? I mean, it seems to be part of the ongoing dialogue here. So, given all that, with all these variables, what do you think is going on, and where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, I was going to say $1 million question. No, billions of dollars question, that is really. And my most honest answer is I don't know. I think we're looking at a spectrum here of incompetence and negligence, and for sure there's an abundance of that is in operation here. How much that goes over onto the spectrum of malicious or nefarious, I don't know. Certainly some of the neglect, I feel certain, is coming from people's self-interest overriding their job or their responsibility. I think that's part of what's gone on here. How much of it is the sort of more sinister plots that are being theorized? I don't know. I don't rule any of them out, but what I do see is an astounding level of a complicated weave of incompetence and neglect. So that's all I guess I can say in terms of my own experience or knowledge.
Yeah. I think a lot of times planned malfeasance really disguises nefarious intent. That's my experience. Let's talk a little bit about Biden. He showed up there, 2 days ago now, yeah. And not a very warm welcome. There were people who were displaying their animosity. 14 days after this thing has happened? There was somebody said that there was a faster response to Ukraine than there was to Lahaina. I don't think, still to this day, I don't think he's gone to East Palestine. I think he sent Pete Buttigieg there, begrudgingly on Pete's part. But he shows up and lots of animosity, lots of FUs. And then they asked him a question and he said, no comment. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're already dissatisfied and frustrated on the island, like that has just got to, that's just got to take you to a whole nother level of seething. What have you talked to people about the whole Biden thing and kind of how it impacted them or how they feel about it?
Well, certainly, yeah. And I think in order to respond adequately to that, it's worth stepping back a little bit. And this may be obvious to everybody, I don't know, but Hawaii has a history with the United States of America, which in just simplest terms is it was stolen. How the Hawaiian lands were stolen in a covert, secretive, malicious takeover by the United States. So there is for some people, it's a seething resentment against the mainland and against political authority, which I completely understand. And so, yeah, why Biden got here so late? Like, yeah, it's good to delay a little bit and allow the first responders to come in, but that much later. And when asked about it, I think that was a week ago when they asked him about it, he said no comment. Like, what a colossal mess up. I mean, you could have said, my heart is with you, or, so many things that could have been said that would have cost nothing. So the reception certainly has not been welcome. And, a couple of the comments that he did make did not land well either, talking about a little house fire that he had some years ago is a little bit insulting to the level of damage and tragedy that's happened here. Yeah, it's unfortunate. He certainly could have done better. But at the same time, again, with the history, it's hard for any mainland person, any white-skinned person to come in here, and the history is such that people are going to be likely resentful of that.
You know who's conspicuously absent around all this is Obama. Like, Obama went to high school theoretically, right, in Oahu, and doesn't he have a place on Maui too? That's what I've heard.
Not that I'm aware of, but it could be.
That's what I've heard. But you would think that one of Hawaii's sons would show up and have some kind words and some support to share with people. He's not there. So, yeah, interesting. You have some child in high school. Let's talk about children. I've heard that there's a lot of missing kids in Lahaina. Have you been there? Have you heard this?
I have heard that, yeah, and one of the parts of the information that's getting passed around is that a lot of kids were sent home from school on the day when the fire was raging, which I, as far as I can tell, is accurate. I don't have a reason to believe that was necessarily something malicious. That's a normal thing that happens here when there's extreme weather. That coincided with parents being away, children being at home, and fires raging through a lot of domestic residential areas. Certainly has the potential to make this tragedy a lot worse.
I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be a parent and have your kid at school and then this thing going off. Like, I would lose my mind in a situation like that. And I'm sure a lot of people have, and not just their mind, they've lost their kids. There's this, of course, we've been trained now to get to the bottom of the rabbit hole as quickly as possible. And one of the dark theories is not just that the kids were lost in the fire, but there's chatter that this has also been kind of background for trafficking. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but have you encountered any information to that extent there?
Not specifically related to this incident. However, I think a lot of us have increased awareness around trafficking lately because of The Sound of Freedom, right? The film that came out recently. And as that's been making its rounds, there's been a resurgence of discussion around trafficking. And one of the things I've heard is that actually Hawaii is one of the, I don't know if epicenters is the right word, but there's a very high level of child trafficking that goes on through Hawaii, which when you think about it, it's not surprising also because it tends to be in some ways a lower socioeconomy, a lower level of education in certain ways. So a more vulnerable population, easier to forget or take advantage of. So certainly could be that there's a direct relationship with the fire. I don't know.
Yeah. In situations like this, sometimes leaders emerge. Have you seen anybody who has kind of taken charge, has sort of shouldered the burden of responsibility? Have you run across anybody like that?
There's no one I would point to individually or specifically, at least not yet. Though, I've certainly, I've been since the beginning saying to myself and saying to others, like, how can I be effective in helping here? And the first day I went to volunteer, I was sent over and I was like sorting clothes for 8 hours, which, I'm happy to help in whatever way I can, but did not feel like it was very effective. And since then, what I've been seeing is a lot of really well-intended people and a lot of great efforts happening, but also a level of organization and communication that's less than optimal. And trying to work with some of my entrepreneurial friends to say, like, all right, how can we do better? Right? Like, let's not wait for the government to save us or somebody to come in and do things. How can we create a higher level of care and organization? There are a couple of grassroots local organizations that have been really stepping up, and I think probably if I had a higher level of awareness, I would point to some specific individuals within those organizations, but I don't have that information to give now.
What's the transportation and travel situation like? I'd heard rumors, like many other people, that they weren't letting people in or out of Lahaina. Obviously, you've gotten in because you've done some volunteering. Can you kind of address that? Is there freedom of movement and transport, or is it very selective?
Well, at this point, it's pretty free. Their first, I don't know, was it 5 days after? No, maybe a full week or so, something like that. There were checkpoints, and they were only permitting people in that had a really valid reason, part of official volunteering or emergency support or something, which was entirely appropriate. And of course, one of the things that we're encountering here is various levels of human nature. And there are those who are trying to take advantage of what's happened for self-gain, with phony GoFundMe campaigns. And, so the general rule or protocol now is like, only go to Lahaina if you've got like an important reason to be there. Like, we don't need gawkers. And on the flip side, there's been some, I think, less than helpful information go out to the public at large, which is saying, leave Maui alone, stay away from Maui. There's not enough resources. And the better information is, leave Lahaina alone. Absolutely. It's a very sensitive area over there, but the rest of Maui still needs tourism to thrive. Right. And a lot of people that weren't directly affected now are being really indirectly affected because they don't have work and they don't have income.
That's a really good point. That it's not like, if there's such a thing as an atomic bomb, that atomic bomb drop and the rest of the island is bathed in isotopes, right? Radioactive isotopes. No, it's still a functional place where people can go and can support the economy. And people like yourself who are involved in local economy. It's a really important thing to remember, and a really great point to bring up. Maybe the best thing that people could do would actually be to go to Maui and spend some dollars there. That's a great point. Do you have any stories of locals that you encountered that you'd like to share by any chance?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, it's a still image that's emblazoned in my consciousness now. And it was a local guy standing on the street over in Lahaina, and he was holding a sign, and the sign said, when somebody comes to help you when they don't have their own, right? When they're in dire circumstances and they are lending a hand, that's not care, that's aloha, right? So with every tragedy, there are silver linings and there are beautiful things about it. And I remember I was in New York City on 9/11, and that, like hours after that, and then the following days, one of the things that was so extraordinary in the city of paranoia is people were looking each other in the eye, right? People were helping each other out. So there is certainly a lot of beauty here that's coming as a silver lining in terms of people helping each other out. One of the things I was doing was with the Red Cross, and what I heard a couple of days ago, they had 1,300 volunteers on a waiting list that they are bringing in to give support and help. So the fact that a lot of people are stepping up and wanting to support the community and doing grassroots types of care is a really beautiful thing.
Right. Well, good. But no stories of tragedy or any kind of like martial fuckery or anything like that.
Well, stories, yes. There's certainly stories going around. Marshall fuckery is a good way of putting it. And there were a lot of stories going around about donations being denied to people that need it. And I honestly don't know how much truth there was to that. I was over there maybe a day or two later when things were still really like we were still reeling from it in shock. And part of what I saw was like over here, there were mountains of supplies, but over here, there were people that needed those supplies. And it was just a matter of communication and understanding and organization, which, I don't think there's been a lot of like government saying we're going to deny people stuff. But I think it seemed that way to a lot of people. And again, the history, when people have been fucked over repeatedly, anything that goes on, it's easy to feel like, well, that's what's happening again.
Right. Sure. History repeating itself. You and I talked about, how this thing moves forward. And, I put it out there that they're not going to do a whole lot initially, right? Like the whole idea would be to stabilize the situation, deal with people who have lost their homes, or businesses, for better or worse. I don't know what that's going to look like, but any plans that they have for Lahaina are not going to be announced or addressed or dealt with for a while, right? Like I would say 6 months minimum, right? Because they don't want to come right out and say, well, oh, look, this is what we're going to do. I mean, some of that has been kind of leaked a little bit. Josh Green, I think, has said, well, we have the power to come in and take the property and kind of rebuild it the way that we think it should be rebuilt, a la, a 15-minute city or whatever, that looks like. But I think that they'll try to work with the locals to for better or worse. And then I don't know what those relocation plans are going to look like. My sense is that unless you have a tremendous amount of capital already, rebuilding is going to be really expensive. And the insurance, if you have it, will not cover all of it, right? So those people will ultimately, they won't put them on a boat and say, see you later, get out of here. But, economically, they'll probably be forced to leave because that's just how these things work, right? And that takes time. And then, 6 months down the line, we'll probably see like, oh, well, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. And this is going to happen. And then a year from now, they'll be celebrating, the new solar farm or whatever. I don't know. Right. But that's my sense. Like they're not going to be in any hurry initially to solve the problem. Right. Do you agree with that? Or do you have some more insight into that?
One of the, I think a lot of what you said is accurate, and I tend to agree. One of the things that stood out for me with Biden's appearance here, one of the clips showed him saying, we're something to the effect of, we're with you all the way. The United States is with you, whatever you need to rebuild how you want it to be rebuilt. And the language of that to me was just like, that just seems weird. Like that does not seem like real language. And it felt like, hey, make sure you say this because that's going to chill people out a little bit because there's so much fear about what's going to be happening here. And yeah, I'm with you. I think, the way the world goes is there are going to be other newsworthy events happening soon enough. Attention's going to go elsewhere. And I have a colleague who's a insurance guy here. And one of the things he shared with me is like a lot of these losses are not going to be insurable because it's going to take so long before they can rebuild because of the level of toxicity. That, one of my concerns is even if it's not all the way on the evil diabolical side, which I don't rule out, but just on the certain level, who's going to be able to afford to rehabilitate some of this prime land in Lahaina Well, it's not going to be you and me or local people. It's going to be people that have billions of dollars available to them. And I don't know about shipping local people off because they're going to want people to be employed, right? So I think they're going to find quarters out there somewhere. That seems like a likely possibility. I don't know.
But yeah, but I think that it would be extremely unusual and probably unlikely that they would come in, rebuild it the way it was, and everybody gets to, go back to their homes and back to their lives, and just hit the reset button. That's just not going to happen. And
yeah, I mean, and also at the same time, I think, well, that shouldn't happen. Like, we should do better than the way it was. And the truth of it is, Lahaina was pretty run down in a lot of ways. But at the same time, going back to, I think your main point there is probably nothing is going to happen. Not much is going to happen for a while.
Right.
And if there are more sinister plots happening here, they're going to let things calm down. But on the flip side, I do feel like we have the opportunity, maybe the likelihood even, that there's enough international awareness now, and we look, what happened at Mauna Kea not long ago. Like there is some power in the people and in this kind of communication that actually maybe can stand in the way of some of the corporate or elite interests that could be at work here.
Right. You brought something up about Lahaina, and one of the charms of Lahaina is that it was rustic, right? It had a rustic feel to it. But as much as it was rustic, there were also parts of it that were run down. And it's one of those things where, you kind of get one in the other. Do you think that there were conditions in Lahaina that were prime for this and that would be now deemed to be unsafe in some ways?
Well, yes, and my first level of response is I'm not knowledgeable enough to give a full response, though. From what I understand, there was a high level of old building materials with a high level of toxic materials, which is part of why we saw such a big level of black smoke coming up from it. And that's part of why it's still blocked off, and part of what people say is, like, it's going to take a while to rehabilitate this area. And it's an interesting thing, Robert. I had a meeting with a group of entrepreneurial friends last week saying, like, what can we do here? And just as I'm an eternal optimist. So just as a thought exercise, I said, can y'all imagine some way that we could have things be better for Hawaii, for Maui, for the local people because of this experience? And in that group, there was about 8 people, and I think 3 of them were born and bred here, local people, and 2 out of those 3 were like, no, like just immediate, don't believe it, don't think so. And whether that makes it true or not, that's another question. But I certainly still hope that, and I hope by enough attention and enough positive energy to it that's possible. Though I think the chances of it going the other way are pretty strong too.
You bring up a really interesting point. And this gets back to 9/11 and the toxicity report of some of the structures that were there, and who knows what they were using in terms of paints, varnishes, maybe to some degree, I don't know if you need it there, but asbestos, right? And one of the things about the Twin Towers is that they were riddled with asbestos. And that was one of the big reasons why most of the first responders who, basically went to sift through the debris of the Twin Towers, they're all dead, right? They're all, there may be a few left, right? But those buildings were really toxic. And here I've got my tin foil little Cubana hat on here. But had they decided that they were going to go in and remove all the asbestos from buildings 1 and 2, it would have been incredibly expensive, right? Really, really expensive. So guess what they got to do? They got to demolish those buildings, right? Big demolition, done. They didn't have to get the permits, nothing. Right now, one could say, well, is that really why it happened? Well, there's a number of reasons, but it's a byproduct of what happened. They didn't have to do it. So if we take that same logic to, let's say, Lahaina, and we don't know what the toxicity report is, but if that's true, that those buildings ultimately were not going to, say, pass code or pass inspection, and we're dealing with something like a 15-minute city, and sort of the green protocols. Tearing a place like that down would cost money, right? It would cost money, and then coming back in and making sure that it was all tight and up to spec and code, so that Klaus Schwab could go in there and have a daiquiri, right? So what do? They waste it all at one point, and now they get to rebuild it just like they did, the One World Freedom Tower. It's a little bit of a cynical thought, but you put it in my head when you brought up the conditions of the buildings. I'd be very interested in understanding to what level of toxicity was, kind of built into those structures.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on it. I've just heard rumors here and there about that. Though it seems pretty clear a high level would be the most general, simple answer.
Yeah, and now that's gone into the water supply, right? I mean, that's leached in to the groundwater, correct?
Well, yeah, there's that. And interestingly, and I don't know if there's any relationship here, but there were other fires happening up country on Maui, right? Like a completely different part of Maui. There was actually quite a few wildfires up there that didn't have wild, who knows, but we'll just call it that. A bunch of fires up there that didn't end up getting out of hand or causing the level of damage, not even close to what happened in Lahaina. However, there was a even bigger effect on the water supply up there. And there's still a huge community up country who now has contaminated water. And that's become a really big deal for a lot of people. I think there's a town hall meeting to address that today, and there are a lot of people that are upset about that. And as far as I can tell, there's no solution in sight for it.
So are you saying that the fires up country created the toxicity for the water, or was the water that's connected to Lahaina connected to that? How does that happen?
Yeah, well, I'll say there's a great Chinese proverb that says, if you want the truth, just let go of your opinion.
Right.
So to the best of my ability, I respond always with, I don't know.
Right.
And what I can see is separate fires, separate causes from everything I can tell. The upcountry fires resulted in a high level of water contamination in a fairly large area. What I've heard the cause is that underground heat affected water supply mains to such a degree that they were old, chemical ridden. The heat leached, somehow released those chemicals into the water supply. And again, it points back to, I think, that we brushed on earlier, at least one of the things that we have to look at with this whole situation is there was a lot of infrastructure that was not taken care of, whether that was telephone poles, whether that was training for people on how to use the alarm system, whether that was the water supply, whether that was communication to the firefighting department, whether that goes back to the communication to, we have this massive military base on another island that could have come over and sprayed water on the town of Lahaina.
Right. They have them. They have those giant water cannons on their vessels. I've seen them. Yeah,
absolutely. And that was, to me, one of the things I was scratching my head from the beginning. Like, I mean, seems like it would be such an easy thing to do. Get over here, spray water on this town that's right by the water. And meanwhile, we hear there are people 7 hours in the water in the harbor because they can't get out because the town's burning all around them.
right. That's a nightmare.
Yeah.
That is a nightmare. Oh my God. You're just hoping that you could just stay afloat while you're watching your life burn. Oh my Jesus. It's like a run of hell. Real quick before we go, what is your opinion of Josh Green, the governor of Hawaii?
Well, I'll preface by saying I haven't met the man in person.
Right.
And my initial reaction to the question is, I was here during COVID, and when that whole thing kicked off, and I heard him speak out. He was, what was he then? Lieutenant governor at that point. And he was speaking a lot as a health professional, as a doctor. And so much of what he said honestly made my blood boil, because I thought it was so hypocritical, contradictory to reason, to logic, to my understanding of health, to the greater purpose, the greater good. So I got a negative impression of him back then. And I don't know the truth of this, but I heard that a couple weeks before these fires kicked off, there was some emergency changes to the land arrangements here. You probably know some about that
Yep,
he was
I've seen
involved with.
I've seen some information around that.
So personally, I have a high degree of skepticism for his intentions. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, interesting. When I was kind of going off about this and ranting and going down a few rabbit holes, the question that came to my mind is that, and I know that there was a woman that he was running against, but it's like, why couldn't Hawaii elect a local governor? Right? Like, why couldn't this outpost of Polynesian culture have somebody who really represented them? I mean, prior to that, you had Ige. We know the Japanese have a big footprint in Hawaii, but it's like, why? Do you have any insight into that? Like, why there's not somebody from Hawaii, somebody from the Hawaiian culture who's not the governor there?
Well, goodness. I think the first honest level of response is, again, I don't know. My inkling is that part of what we deal with here, I lived for a long time in Indonesia prior to coming here, and over there's a very high level of corruption and broken systems. And geographically, Hawaii is right in between Indonesia and mainland US. And I'm not implying in any way that there's zero corruption in mainland US. However, I think here it's complex. And even though, of course, we're all the information is available here, just like on mainland US, though there's a level of, I don't know, old school, old boys network, things falling back into old ways of looking at things, a high level of corruption. I think things are in some ways kind of backwards and challenging on that level here. So I don't know. I think that would be helpful. I'm with you.
Who was the woman that he defeated? What was her name?
I know who you mean, and the name's escaping me at the moment, though.
Her name is like Mama something, or she has one of these, kind of very colloquial names. But he defeated, and I don't think she was a Republican. I think she might have run against him in the primary or something. Because I don't think a Republican would stand a chance in Hawaii. Okay, so do you have anything else that you want to share with people? Is there a nonprofit, or is there something that you're representing or working with? Any other thing you want to bring to light here?
Well, I guess the two things I would say are one, for anybody that was considering or is considering vacation, just as you said, yeah, it would be helpful to Maui to come here, stay away from Lahaina, enjoy the rest of the island, and spend some of your dollars and have a great time here, because that would help. Also helpful to just pray and send good wishes to what's going on here. Helpful to stay tuned in so that, yeah, when the spotlight does switch, that we stay aware of what's going on and protective of what's right here. And in terms of nonprofits, I think there are some good ones that are involved. I do know that the Maui United Way has a donation fund that goes directly, 100% donations go directly to families that were affected. So I think that's a good, reliable one. And yeah, I think that's about all I can say. I appreciate you shining the light here.
If there's any links that you want to share with me, so I can put them up and put them in the show notes to any of these organizations, just go ahead and do that. Let me know.
Happy to.
Daniel, it's been great. It's really good to get to know you, and I can tell that you're a man of integrity and sincerity. And we'll have you back on again, maybe 3 or 4 weeks down the line. We'll check in, see what's changed, what's not changed, and I really appreciate your time, your presence, just being there. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be with you. I'm glad to get to know you too. We didn't touch into the astrology of all of this at all yet, but maybe we can do that another time because I'm sure there's a lot to
We
learn
can
there
dive
too.
into this. I think this was a good first meeting, and just trying to get a sense of what your eyes are seeing there and experiencing there. And
Yeah.
we can go, clearly more abstract and a bit esoteric, and probably have a really good conversation around that. So tell people where they can find you and your podcast and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm easy to find. DanielAaron.com, DanielAaron.com. My video show, the podcast, is called The Art of Vibrant Living Show.com. So yeah, thank you. And I'm happy to connect with people and support however I can.
Okay, that's great. All right, Daniel. We're gonna see you somewhere down the line. In the meantime, stay strong and take care of yourself, because we know that's important too. Okay.
Indeed. Thank you, Robert. Take care.
All right, that was Daniel Aaron from just outside of Lahaina in Maui, and I hope you enjoyed that. It was about an hour interview, a little less than an hour interview. And what I really like about Daniel is kind of this holistic perspective he is bringing to the experience, right? Um, and I respect that. I really respect that, in that he's trying to figure out what's going on. He's also trying to be there and help and be present, and I think that that's a very even-handed approach to the art of living, right? You're gonna try to peel back some layers and see what's happening, and at the same time, you're gonna kind of be there and see, well, what can I do, right? So I really respect him for that, and we're gonna have him back on in a few weeks and see what if anything has changed. There's a couple of other people that I'm in contact with in Maui, and one was somebody who actually hooked me up with Daniel, and then she's returning next week, and it'll be good to see if we can get her on as a guest. And she has, I would say, a slightly more conspiratorial lens. Not that Daniel's not unaware of these things happening; he clearly is. But in his own words, he's an eternal optimist. So he's gonna really balance those two perspectives out. My other connection in Maui has a kind of a big cosmic perspective, which also includes some of the things that we like to throw out into the show and kick around. And then there's another person who was whose name and number I've yet to reach out to them, but I will, who is right in Lahaina. So we're going to continue to try to stay in touch with people there. It's really hard. It's been really hard to stay in touch with sort of the whole Ukrainian experience. Like we had a connection early on when the so-called war was going down. Um, but it's been challenging, to say the least. I think we have a much better chance of tracking Lahaina and touching base and figuring out what's happening or not happening. So, and again, Daniel Aaron, thank you. DanielAaron.com is his website, and I'm sure you can find his podcast and everything else that's associated with what he's doing there. That's where we are and where we've been, and where we're going. That's up to you, because the show is ending. I've got a client, very busy schedule, so we got a quick in and out 1 hour, but it was nutrient dense today. We'll be back on Sunday night, right here on Sunday Night Astro Live. And next week on the show, the Friday FARcast, is the return of the great Russ Winter, and we'll have plenty to talk about, I'm sure, by then. In the meantime, use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to step on what's possible. Chattaria, you're the best. A lot of time I'm doing a show, and I don't get to read your comments always. And I love reading the comments today, and putting a few salient comments up on the stream while the action was happening. So that was a real treat for me today. All right, everybody, take care of yourself. God bless. We'll see you on Sunday night, and bye for now.